Should be recording that. Right. Can everyone hear me? Everyone who's online? The response? Can you hear me? Those of you who are online? Okay. Can you activate your camera, please, so that I can see you as well?
Could you please repeat?
Can you activate your camera so that I can see you as well? Can you activate your camera?
We can turn on the cameras.
Okay, great. Excellent. How about the rest of you? Can you hear me? Mr. Pegnotti? Mr. Papadoniou, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but the sound is not very good today. I don't know why.
Lovely. So, apologize for not having invited you in the an acquaintance session that we held earlier, but we had to start with the course because the time had already elapsed 5 minutes, I guess, behind schedule. So hopefully after the break, we'll have the chance to recap in terms of the participants of this course, and you will have the opportunity to present yourselves to the rest of the class who are present here with us in Steve. Without further ado, let's move on to the presentation itself. So today's lecture is about coming to terms with the fundamentals of branding. Then we shall be looking into some indicative branding related models. And finally, we shall look into research methods for branding. And of course, we shall be looking in greater detail about research methods next week when we talk about brand equity. But let's try to come to terms with the very basics. So what is a brand? The official definition that is given for brands by the American Marketing Association is that a brand is a name, term, sign, symbol, or design, or a combination of them that are intended to identify the goods and services of one seller or group of sellers and differentiate them from those of competition. The keywords here are sign, symbol, or design, and differentiation. So basically, a symbol, sign may be a logo or an advertising communication or any other aspect of brand identity. And what you want to do with this brand identity is to differentiate yourself from the competitors. This is the alpha and the omega of branding. Of course, it's not simple, but in practice, it's as complex as planning anything that is not quite as complete as it looks. And the reason why it's not as complete as it looks is that a brand is everything a customer or a stakeholder sees, feels, and experiences about a product or service, which amounts to the sum of primary and secondary brand associations that are stored in the consumer's memory about a brand. The distinction between primary and secondary brand association is the kind of associations that remain in consumers' minds about brands. Primary, they're bound up with the functional benefits of a brand or with attributes that inherit the brand, whereas secondary associations, they're more akin to the intangible aspects that I was talking about earlier.
When it says memory, it means like the feelings we have about a brand in the past, like what we know about the brand. Is that it?
In the past,
I remember reading the book and it said something about Coca-Cola being so popular because it resonated with people feelings about the modern Americana. Is that it? Or it is memory?
well, memory, you're talking about the book Keller's book. Keller's book, the main schema, the main drawing, graph, or conceptual model in Keller's book, on which we'll be drawing quite extensively over this course, is called Brand Model Structure. So yes, this is the exact model that includes memory, and the process of memorizing will be scrutinized very extensively next Monday. So you hold your horses until next Monday. We'll be discussing very extensively about parallel distributed processing and different methods of researching what consumers store in memory. We shall start actually today, hopefully we shall have sufficient time, because time runs out very quickly. So let's move on swiftly to the next slide. This is again a typical portrayal of a brand by Keller and Kotler. The brand is a series of concentric circles. At the very core, we have the core benefit of the brand, that is its brand promise, what its promises, its very basic promise to the consumer. At the exactly next layer, we have the basic product, that is the threshold requirements of the product or service, but in terms of tangible benefits, that is functional oriented. Third level, the expected product, a set of attributes and conditions that buyers normally expect when they purchase this product. This includes a layer of intangible benefits as well. And things start getting worry as soon as we move to the fourth layer, that is the augmented product. This is the territory where most of competition takes place nowadays. The augmented product, which is a product mix that exceeds customer expectations because you add always a little extra. And this extra doesn't have to be just product oriented. It may be added by adopting all sorts of different tactics from different strategic frameworks, which derive from all P's, as we shall be looking at in great detail during week 3. Whenever you want to add something extra added value, this can be done either by price, by distribution, another distribution channel, by co-branding activity, all sorts of tactics and strategies for producing this augmented product. So this is the main territory of competition nowadays. And finally, the potential product is more far out than the augmented product. It includes all the possible augmentations and transformations that a product might undergo in the future. This is, let's say, the very expanded notion of diversification, where a brand moves far away from its core positioning territory, which might be, let's say, cleaning products, and decides to produce something very weird, at least as regards its point of departure. It might be clothing or something that sounds equally dissonant. So this is the potential product. Of course, what is weird and what is dissonant has nothing to do with objective criteria. This is again always about your positioning. How you position yourselves in the market, and of course whether your selected positioning is credible by consumers, if it's credible, relevant, and slight as well. So you have to meet all these criteria. From a strategic marketing point of view, this criteria again, as I shall present next week, deal with brand associations. This is the keyword, brand associations. Whatever you do, the first thing that should pop into your mind is the word brand association. The second one is brand association transfer. It's still brand association, but it has the transfer at the end of the sentence. We're talking about this transfer there. So again, this is another way of representing more or less the same by Aaker. So let's keep it. What kind of benefits stem from brands for consumers? First of all, the signaling quality. There's a massive difference between a branded product and a private label, no-name product. There are vehicles for symbolic and social approval. most importantly, the risk reduction mechanisms. And there are various levels of risk. For example, functional risk. It's a way of maintaining consistency in terms of quality or avoiding suboptimal performance. You trust this brand of yogurt because each time that you purchase it, it tastes exactly the same. So it's you reduce the functional risk of buying something new by that might be not meet exactly your expectations. Financial risk, consistent quality in line with perceived value. So not just a matter of quality, but how much you pay for it as well. And the higher the exchange in terms of monetary value, the higher the risk in terms of functional in functional terms, but also in terms of social risk. Just taking account that this might be a PC, and you opted for a less well-known PC because you bought it perhaps 100 euros less. But at the end of the day, it didn't meet your requirements in terms of graphics, in terms of all sorts of different criteria. So you do make a wise choice, and this, of course, has repercussions in terms of your performance, in terms of your ability to convince others about your performance, and so on and so forth. This is a kind of psychological risk that is a well-known brand avoiding the satisfaction of things for poor product choice, or both in terms of how good you feel about yourself for making a choice, as well as about how you present your choice to others, whether it be clothing, whether it be a new car, whether it be a new house, so forth. Branding, as Kyros, Tassos correctly said earlier, is exactly the difference between structure and process. The process is the branding as a continuous process of building a brand, measuring its performance, and again, iteratively coming back full circle to the planning stage. Whereas structure is what you produce in this planning process, that is launching a brand, placing on shelf, and so on and so forth. While marketing investigate the actual branding process, which is the branding as input, it is the buyer of the user forms mental vision of the brand that is branding as output, which may be different from intended marketing thrust. This is a fundamental distinction in branding between what you project as a marketer and what's actually perceived. And this will become even more important when we're talking about brand image. There's brand image has two facets, like Hermes or Janus. It's both extrovert, outward looking, and inward looking. Looking towards the consumer and looking towards the center of its identity. And these two must match. Otherwise, whatever there's mismatch, you have to bridge it. And this is the job of the brand manager, the advertising agency, the research agency, and so on and so forth. Now, the branding challenge may be portrayed metaphorically via this iceberg. The upper part of the iceberg, well, also called sometimes the tip of the iceberg, or the iceberg with a K, whatever is on top, anyways, is concerns the manifest elements of the brand. Its logo, its name, its jingles. However, the part that makes the most of the difference is the bottom part, which concerns the intangible or the non-manifest, non-manifestly evident parts, its values, its culture, and this is what you are starting to persuade the consumer that you better be purchased because of your values and because of your brand culture as well. And the branding challenge concerns correctly matching your manifest elements with what you represent. Otherwise, what will happen? If you don't match these two parts of the iceberg, any ideas? Well, failure for sure, but why would you fail because you didn't produce a match between these two layers?
Yes.
Excuse me, can you repeat? Because
Yes, the branding challenge is to consistently ensure that there is a match between the upper layer of the iceberg and the bottom part. And what will happen if you don't ensure that this much is consistently applied?
Either you will not have the right, the name that it fits to your business, or you will not be seen, or um, uh, the clients will not even know what's about.
Exactly. Even worse, your competitor will simply capitalize on your values. And this happens quite often. For example, if you're a new brand, a new entrant in a category, but you're not as well known as a market leader or a more well known brand, and you start talking about a set of values that have not yet been popularized in the category, this may be more easily claimed by a big and entrenched competitor with considerably less resources. This is a typical phenomenon in marketing. It's called spillover. So what actually happens is that your investment, the result of your investment, spills over to a competitor because you didn't have the position to claim it, because you were a new entrant, not that well known, and so on and so forth.
But
Everyone always is speaking expositio from a particular position standpoint. There's no talking out of a specific position. For example, you may be a very small player and we're talking about the value of peace. You will not be taken as seriously as if you're a big brand player. Say, for you, who starts preaching about, these sorts of values, especially when it comes to more abstract values that are not explored just by brand. They're free-floating as a value system in a society in general. There's much difference between these claims being made by a small player and a big player. This is why you need to maintain, what you need to maintain across time is this match between these different parts, the different parts of the iceberg. Yes, the values, but with your brand name, but otherwise the competitor is going to do it for you. That's why we start defining brands with a very term differentiation. You must be different, differentiate yourself from a competitor, from competition, but in a manner that's sustainable. You know what you think you can do, is what you can realistically do. In order to understand and gauge whether you can realistically expect this outcome, you must apply research. Research, research, research. There's nothing outside of marketing, in marketing that cannot be researched and should not be researched. There are various companies, there are various companies, even large corporations, that rely on instinct, on intuition when making some decisions, and others which are very heavy investors in research. It doesn't make, for the sheer reason that there are quite bulky budgets involved in every decision. So you want to optimize your decision, and this is why research is for. Here we're talking about strategic brand management, which means that the research you conduct today is supposed to be yielding perhaps profits 3 years down the line. So you can understand that unless you research very extensively new brand launch with this positioning, with this particular communication mix, you're going to fail. Chances are you may not fail, but by chance. And of course, we know what are the percentages right now, and we don't take these risks.
It's possible to create something entirely different than all the others in the same sector by researching.
Of course, definitely.
Is there parthenogenesis? I don't know how to.
Yes. Well, not exactly parthenogenesis. There's creative nihilo in Latin. There is a term, it's called intertextuality in the social sciences, which means that there's no text that is not somehow related with some prior text. And this is something that I also claim in my book, The Discussive Readings in Cultural Consumer Research, that the essence of any phenomenon is essentially inter. There's nothing that inheres in an object or a subject or social phenomenon because it always already dependent on something that is in between. And in this in betweenness is first and foremost, especially speaking, grammar. In order to articulate something as existent, you require a grammar. And in order to communicate, or be capable of communicating also, you need grammar, which means that you're already bound up with a certain form of discourse that's much more foundational than other forms. It's not just a matter of, let's say, religion informing the launch of a new magazine. So you're dependent intertextuality of this prior form of discourse. Grammar is a foundational form that you need for it to relate all other possible forms. So there's no such thing as creatio ex nihilo. Because creatio is always already dependent on some rules.
Can I ask something? When you say about research, um, what and how do you research? Because if I personally were to research about something which I don't know about, my only source would be like the internet. How do professionals read research?
There are various marketing research agencies. And marketing research is a profession by itself. And it's very well entrenched, and there are thousands of methodologies for researching all possible details that you could imagine and not imagine as well. Research is right now the tools we have at our availability, the methods are so very numerous and in depth that I can hardly think of any aspect in brand management that cannot be researched by this sort of methodology. And even if there is not one, there is enough brain power and capacity to invent new methodology. This is a very good question, and there are many marketeers, of course, who are not versed in research. Research tends to be something that's called by most professionals in practice on the job. This is why I insist that it's something that will be to your benefit, it will be added value to you if at least you're acquainted with some fundamental and quite extensive in some occasions forms of research for different brand management issues. It's a massive add-on because exactly you will know how to provide answers to the issues that you will be facing as a practitioner. The internet, of course, there are benefits and a massive downside. The downside is that if you're not knowledgeable about something, then you might follow the wrong track, especially in such a complex area as marketing research. There's also no one size fits all. There's already made research reports that unfortunately do not necessarily match the very specific requirements. And in brand management, what makes the difference is being very, very specific and doing things differently than the competition. This goes for research as well. Just picture this, and this happens quite often. There are three major players, and they all hire research agencies to run tracking surveys. A tracking survey will be looking at in greater detail what's the tracking survey later on. It's an ongoing survey about consumers' perceptions about brands and so on and so forth. And they produce exactly the same results in terms of where they stand relative positioning, in terms of brand image, and so on and so forth. Somehow they're all getting exactly the same input. So it's they have very limited potential for making different moves in order to compete against each other. Whereas if you hire an agency that specializes in a very minute fashion and produces very different results in insights than the rest, then you're capable of seeing the same phenomenon, but from a different angle. And it's very important in brand management to be capable of looking at the same phenomenon from different angles, whether this is both qualitative and quantitative techniques at the same time, or different qualitative techniques that produce different outputs about the same issue. For example, brand maps. We'll be looking at how brand maps produce different results. Yeah. Great. So the first one, this initial part of today's lecture, I want to focus on 5 or 6 key terms in branding, on which we must be in absolute agreement as to the definition. First, because they have been defined in so many different terms across the academic literature, not to mention the practitioner literature. And second, because unless we're on the same page about what each of these key terms means, then when you handle your essays, you will probably be meaning different things. And this tends to happen. It's definitely not a trap in which you might fall in students. This is a trap in which research scholars and authors often make. That is, employing some of these terms intuitively, despite the fact that they have been defined in no sorts of fanciful ways in the literature. And this is one of the benefits, I think, for you to be receiving this knowledge in an academic institution rather than in a hands-on manner, because from an academic point of view, we're often called someone to disambiguate these terms. One of our main tasks is to define specifically what they mean, precisely in order to avoid these fallacies of that stem from resting on intuitive notions. This happens quite often between marketing department and advertising agency. These terms are meant in a completely different fashion by the ad agency and completely by the marketing department. This might be because especially for multinational companies, they have an idiosyncratic way of defining these terms, either in line with the dominant meaning in the literature, or in their own unique ways. And why do they tend to define it in unique ways? Because, as I said before, the more differently you define and you look at things, the less you can be copied with the competition. So just think that you're a brand manager in Procter & Gamble, and you received a training course on branding and brand management, where you had the opportunity to learn these terms from within a school, because it is a very good school. At the same time, Procter & Gamble, don't follow them, of course, but it's a great company with great marketing. You were trained in the brand management specific way. Of course, a competitor from Unilever might have and they do have different definitions with these terms, and somehow they're exposed to internal documents from Procter & Gamble. Chances are that either misunderstand what's going on there, or they will be making different assumptions. So unless we'll agree about what these terms mean, then we will not be capable of moving forward. So these are very, very important. These slides, the majority of these definitions stem from your core textbook, that is Keller Strategic Brand Management. And in these slides, I've summarized all key points. The slides are part of your core syllabus, and you can also refer to them in your assignments. We shall be talking about the assignments next week. I will be uploading both the themes and the background literature for the following weeks, I think today or tomorrow, maximum.
Excuse me, do we have only individual or group assignment also?
Both.
Both.
Yeah. But don't be scared because they're interdependent.
Excuse me?
Don't be
No.
overwhelmed. Yeah, don't be overwhelmed. They're independent, and they what the written assignment aims is that putting your own signature, your own way of understanding, showing that you understood things correctly, and that you have also researched all the relevant topics, rather than being the one who's sitting in the corner and everybody else who's doing the group work, which tends to happen. Yeah, apart from that, it's feasible. It's not something that should concern you, and every need and support you may have. Yeah.
We will have the chance to do something like
Yes.
a project.
I will send you my office hours again, along with the project title and themes today or tomorrow. Most likely it's going to be either Tuesday or Thursday in the afternoon. But if it's something urgent or something that you find really tantalizing and you can move further unless you completely sure what it is, then you can always drop me emails. I need help. That's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are the group assignments in two? The group assignments are in two or
It's a 16 person class, I think 15. There are 15 students in this class. So in order to be capable of allotting sufficient time for each presentation at the end of the course, which will be ranging between from 50 to 20 minutes. I think we'll have to organize an exact number of 4 participants per group. 4, and 3. Yeah. Okay then. Right. So what's brand identity? Brand identity is a brand's expressive inventory, that is the building blocks of a manifest brand structure that give rise to brand meaning. Manifest brand structure, that is what the consumer sees. Brand name, slogans, sonic signature, the sound you hear every time you open your PC, that is the window sound, jingles, music, characters, Tony the Tiger, colors, for example, Apple's rainbow or Campari red passion, packaging, unique shapes, brand communications, endorses as brand's spokespersons, famous actors, famous singers, and finally, ingredients, for example, political aloe vera. Now, identity is always on the product side. Remember the 2 sides of Hermes? What you project and what is perceived. Identity is always the projected part. Apart from a scholar called Keller, of whose model will be developing in a while and probably in place. But apart from that model, every time you refer, especially when something to brand identity, because you will be conducting a brand audit, you have to conduct a brand audit, your brand planning procedure, that is analyze these elements for your brand, for the existing brand, for your new brand, and for the competitors as well. So let's say this is the outcome of our brand audit in terms of brand identity, blah, 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 brand demands, blah, blah, blah. Brand demands, what is perceived by consumers, brand identity, what is projected. Brand positioning. This is a foundational concept. Positioning is the act of designing a company's offering and image to occupy a distinctive place in the minds of the target market. The goal is to locate the brand in the minds of consumers to maximize the potential benefit of the firm. And in order to do that, again, we have to effect an overlap between what is intended and what is received, this positioning. So my positioning is that I want to be I want to offer the best possible teeth cleaning toothpaste that fights cavities but gives fresh breath as well. This is your positioning statement. And a positioning statement, which is usually also including written from a brand plan, so that everybody's aligned with what is the main mission for the brand. It's also called brand promise. What you write in a proposition statement is what you promise to consumers, and this is what you have to sell. Positioning entails the identification of appropriate points of parity and points of differentiation. Points of parity essentially constitute the fundamental threshold requirements for competing in a category. That is, for toothpaste that cleans your teeth. There's no toothpaste that doesn't clean your teeth. Otherwise, it wouldn't be toothpaste. So this is a very foundational criteria for buying the brand. It's called point of parity because it's in parity with everybody else in the category. What you're looking at is your point of differentiation. Toothpaste for whitening, non-volume, for fresh breath, for cavity fighting, all sorts of different needs, wants, and of course the more intangible the product, as we said, the more this augmented product, remember what we're talking about augmented product, is going to be extending to all sorts of different directions. Again, hyper differentiation in a cluttered environment, especially the pharmaceutical consumer goods, a space environment is key. It's called hyper differentiation. It's inevitable. It's inevitable because markets have matured, consumer needs, wants, and desires have matured in tandem with the offers. So, companies are looking more and more intensively for differentiating their offers with all sorts of minute ways. And points of difference, for example, Louis Vuitton names and point of difference that has this more stylish handbag for an Energizer that it has the longest lasting battery. What's the difference between Louis Vuitton, of course, and Energizer? That is it's much easier for a competitor, especially for a low-cost competitor to enter the market with exactly the same promise in functional terms, than it is for a new brand to claim that it has a stylish handbags as Louis Vuitton. Because Louis Vuitton, what a premiumly positioned brand doesn't make this claim explicitly, it projects it through its communication, through the style of the actors it's using in its advertising, through the design. So this is why most of the lifestyle-oriented advertising about which we'll be talking in the second part of this course, which is about IMC, is more pictorially oriented. An image is 1,000 words. This works exactly in this fashion when it comes to differentiating between premium luxury brands and more, let's say, function-oriented brands. For example, Energizer, again, it does feature this visual of a bunny which keeps drumming over and over, whereas all the rest bunnies have, dying. But again, at the end of the day, there is a caption that says Energizer will last longer or blah, blah, blah. We does not have such a way of life. It doesn't need such a way of life. It's almost immediate from within. On week 6, that is midterm, we shall hold a session about emergent perspectives in branding. I think this is very important for you in order to gain an edge, both as a practitioner as well as in academic terms, to acquaint yourselves with all different areas where branding has been applied. Because branding, of course, kicked off quite a long time ago. It's at least a century old discipline. It became a super very scientific character in the 50s, and there's a massive literature on all sorts of topics from the 50s onwards. Over the past 20 years, the specific topics where it has been applied with great success in some ways. For example, hospitality and tourism management. There's a strand that's called place and destination branding, which is almost as prolific as all the rest branding territories themselves. There has been so much research and so much knowledge production, especially useful for you as well. Because if you live in Naxos, an island with independent tourism population, be capable of your service or product alongside what is claimed by the island as key points of attraction, as key brand destination or place brand elements. We'll talk in very great detail about this one because it's a challenge for place brands, and I think that will have quite a lot in that respect. So yes, points of parity and attributes of brand associations that are not necessarily unique to the brand. There may be category points of parity or competitive points of parity. Now, moving on to brand image, this is one of the most researched topic in branding, and this is one of the most important aspects that must be addressed in every brand management decision as well. What you're primarily looking at is to increase your sales by safeguarding that the image attributes that make up your brand are correctly perceived by the consumer. So, if you were a brand manager, what would be your main mission? Would not be to generate sales. This is the task of the sales department. What you should do is generate sales by way of safeguarding your brand image. This is where strong brand comes in. If you don't safeguard what you project in image terms is actually perceived as such, and your revenue stem because your brand image is perceived in a very specific way, you will have problems. You will encounter problems. That's the main task of brand management. This team of researchers, Barbara Stern et al., in 2001 produced a literature review of brand image related papers that have been written by that time, at that time, in the marketing academic literature. It's quite an extensive review. The previous one took place 10 years earlier in 1990 by Dogme et al. And Stern et al. Identified 5 dimensions whereby the construct that's called brand image had been defined in the brand literature. The first cluster featured generic definitions. The second one is bold definitions. The third one, meaning and message definitions. The fourth one, personification definitions. I'm not going to in greater detail about each one because not at the time, but what's important in this exercise is that the final cluster, the cognitive or psychological definitions, is the, let's say, dominant strand in marketing and branding research nowadays. This is why brand model structure, that is Keller's blueprint for understanding and planning for brands and brand equity. It's called brand model structure because it has a cognitive dimension. Of course, there's also an affective dimension, but the affective dimension is also part of an overall cognitive structure. That's why the perspective is called, scientific perspective, is called cognitive psychology. And this definition derived from the link between image, as I said, there are other perspectives as well, for example, the cultural perspective, which I will be drawing in the emerging perspectives, but the dominant one is cognitive psychology. And this definition is derived from the link between image as a set of extrinsic attributes of a real world brand and image as a mental construct that is developed by the consumer. So again, it's a matter of two parts of the iceberg, the extrinsic attributes for the upper part, and the mental construct that is developed by the consumer. There is an overlap, a convergence between the values that project by the brand and consumers' own values as well. That's specific research as we shall see. There are 3 main types of brand image. Brand image that stands for brand attributes, for brand benefits, and from user imagery. And it's again a distinction between product and non-product based associations, which I defined earlier alongside the functional, non-functional continuum. The brand image part that stems from brand attributes concerns descriptive features that characterize a product or service. For example, a car that has sufficient horses in order to speed on the national highway, or any other inherent characteristics in the product. Whereas brand benefits, they also may be functional, for example, deep cleaning, but they may also be more intangible, such as symbolic benefits. This is a product that emits status, a brand emits status, and experiential, fun. Experiential branding is one of the most burgeoning perspectives in branding and brand management. Because the so-called experiential economy has been one of the most growing ones at exponential rate over the past years. People are looking for experiences. Whether this is canoeing, whether this is a trip to far land somewhere in the Amazon, or it might be a festival, a more mundane, urban fun, so on and so forth. And finally, user imagery concerns the projectile profile of the ideal brand user by a brand. For example, a brand that is entertaining, sophisticated, or savvy. Brand loyalty is directly linked to brand equity and brand strength. There are two main types of loyalty: behavioral and attitudinal loyalty. Behavioral loyalty concerns the frequency whereby a brand is purchased or repurchased compared to the competitors and the respective repurchase cycle in a product category. This may be researched in different ways. One of them is by purchasing what's called consumer panel data from a retail loaded company that's called Nielsen, and another one is called IRI, that tells you how many times a specific brand was purchased by a specific consumer segment, for example, age or gender-based segment, within a month. So if you have a repurchase cycle, a consistent purchase cycle, for example, by comparing to the purchase cycle of a category, it means that you have a loyal clientele. For example, for the other ones, the category, the repurchase cycle may be 1 month, and you found that also your brand has 1 month repurchase cycle. This is exactly in line with the repurchase cycle of the category. So you're not underperforming, and your brand has loyalty compared to the category. For example, if another deodorant brand is bought twice per month, then this means that you underperform against the other competitor. So behavioral loyalty is one of the ways whereby behavioral loyalty is caused. Excuse me. The second one is called attitudinal loyalty, which is the psychological equivalent of behavioral loyalty. Behavioral loyalty is actually evidenced through actual purchase, whereas attitudinal loyalty is when it's simply stated in research. For example, a researcher asks you, and now would like to tell me which of these brands we will consider purchasing in your next visit to the shop. And you have 1 to 3 brands. The higher the incidence of your brand in this repertoire, the more attitudinal loyal the customer is toward your brand. Typical questions that are asked in order to gauge this type of loyalty is either intention to purchase or intention to recommend as well. For example, complementary to respond to the question which brands you will consider purchasing during your next trip to the supermarket, you might be asked whether you would be keen on recommending this brand to your friends, to your family. Again, this is a proxy measure of attitudinal loyalty. And the third one, which is a mixture of these two, it's a combination of behavioral and attitudinal loyalty methods. And for example, when you have calculated what percentage of entire consumption consumer group is accounted for by your brand, Then you can use this pool as the basis for calculating the average volume consumption. So, and then comparing it to other groups, for example, more peripheral purchasers. In this way, the attitudinal loyalty part, which is those who said they consume your brand most often in a category, will be combined with actual purchase terms based on what they stated as the average consumption in volume terms. For example, how many glasses of this beer do you consume per month, and which brand do you drink most often. You combine this in a pivot table, a typical breakdown, by assuming the first as the basis for calculating the answer to the second. This is the brand loyalty pyramid by one of the two most prominent figures in the brand equity literature, David Aaker. The first one, the first author is Keller, whose text is one of your two main textbooks for this course. And the second key figure in the academic and practitioner literature, he has a consulting agency in New York. It's called Profit. I'm looking at it later. He coined this brand loyalty pyramid in his book Managing Brand Equity in the late 70s, early 80s, which stretches from the very base that consists of brand switchers or consumers who are more price sensitive and have a more expanded repertoire of products towards the apex of the pyramid, where consumers like your brand, they will recommend your friend, and they're very committed to buying it anew. So this pyramid is an attempt to create a continuum from more peripheral consumers who switch among different brands, most likely based on promotions. They're also called promotional hunters, towards loyal consumers. Again, this is a very nice way of segmenting your market based on their degree of loyalty to your brand. The next key term is brand equity. Of course, this is our main topic for the entire semester and the key topic for the next week's lecture. But in order to be capable of appreciating its importance, I think it's of paramount value if we scrutinize it even at such a fundamental level. Brand equity is a construct that conceptualizes and measures brand strength in consumer behavior terms and brand value in financial terms. It is a differential effect of brand knowledge as a consumer response to the market of the brand. And this knowledge refers to the establishment of a brand knowledge structure. So the differential effects of a brand actually concerns how a brand knowledge structure is reflected in consumers' minds, memories, as strong, favorable, and unique associations. This is your mantra for this semester with 3 words: strong, favorable, and unique brand associations. Whatever you do and whatever you write in your assignment, don't forget to write these 3 words. And of course, back them up with research wherever available, which is very important. And this is very important for making your strategic decisions. Not only you must be capable of being strong, but also favorable, that is, that the associations are alike, and unique, that they're not only by you and not just any competitor. We were saying earlier about the possibility of making a claim, but because you're not as credible as another competitor, your claim spills over the competitor. So you create the association. It is strong, it is favorable association, but it's not unique to you. You don't mind explaining. So at the end of the day, your brand structure fails. So I hope you start to understand, because the reason is that this brand management is very abstract, because we're dealing with very abstract concepts. But these abstract concepts that will allow you to sustain a competitive advantage and to make a brand longevity rather than a fad. So I'm glad that you start to grapple, the usefulness of this level of abstraction, because this was what underpins every brand launch, serious brand launch. Of course, you can always, create or capitalize entrepreneurially on an innovative idea and create a few brochures and upload them on crowdsourcing, and then state your expected financing level. But that's not marketing, yeah? This is social media marketing. This way, I insist that it has nothing to do whatsoever with digital marketing planning, and this way, big organizations, large organizations shall be looking at a case studies over these months, invest so much in research and brand equity. Most of them have specialized people who look into brand equity, apart from brand managers. For example, Coca-Cola has a position for brand equity responsible, and other companies as well. And the reason is that it's the apex of the company's value. And what I mean by that will become clear next week when we talk about the financial value that is allocated to these particular abstractions. What sound at this stage, and it's very expected that they sound as mere abstractions, this costs more money than the actual premises of the company and everything else it sells. And finally, brand personality. This is the set of human characteristics that are associated with the brand. Aaker, this is not Aaker, but in a way it's still the same because it's the daughter of David Aaker, it's Jennifer Aaker. Jennifer Aaker created a brand, one of the most famous brand personality models in the academic literature, and also been applied quite extensively in the practitioner's world. For example, brand is perceived in terms of personal characteristics such as age, gender, its physique, its behavior. For example, absolute tends to come across in consumer surveys as being cool, hip, contemporary, 25 years old, versus Richmond, which is more conservative and older. Or the very famous extensively aired Mac versus PC campaign. Any of you who have seen this campaign? It was very popular quite a few years ago, but it's very impactful because there are so many executions over more than 5 years that it has left its imprint on the advertising and brand literature. And this is a very indicative example of portraying in human terms, Mac has been trying to cool young versus PC has been old-fashioned and practical. Let's say
PC different, like isn't Mac a PC?
Mac or PC? PC is standard PC with Windows, whereas Mac is Apple's Mac. So here's how they personified this distinction through a series of advertising executions. So what do you see? What kind of distinction becomes readily apparent as soon as you look at these two guys?
The one is young, more youth looking. The other guy is like very middle-aged and with the old stuff.
Exactly. And how about how they approach the different programs?
The behavior.
How they refer to their capacities, their computational capacities, their functional aspects.
Yes, the left one, I see. Seems like more stiff and like he doesn't understand what the other one is saying because he's saving him with things that PC doesn't do, and he doesn't understand it. So it's like more old-fashioned.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a very typical way of making a brand more approachable to consumers, because you identify, as soon as consumers see this advert, he either identifies with one stereotype or the other. So, oh, I'm more, hip, I'm more trendy, so I should probably get a mic. Yeah? It triggers, it makes a direct connotation association in the brain. So that's the purpose of deploying an anthropomorphization strategy, such as brand personality. And right, it's. I think we will better take a break if you agree. Short one because we have a lot of material to cover. But let's try to recharge the batteries for 10 minutes. And yeah, I get back at 10 to 8. Is it fine with you? Yeah.
Can we go with that?
Sure, yeah.